You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates. So nice of you to join us this morning to talk about all things Toronto real estate. We are #1 on Google Podcasts for that subject. Thanks to our listeners. You guys are awesome. We're going to continue to put out wonderful content, keeping you guys informed as COVID-19 spreads and hopefully stops spreading across Canada. So too does the news related to our marketplace. And so we share it with you here first every single day. And today I want to talk about a few fun topics. First, we're going to start off talking about what price discounts exist in Toronto right now. If you search Toronto real estate, you'll get a bunch of articles, and we're going to cover kind of what they're talking about. This idea of condo prices having dropped 10% in this study from Zoocasa. I want to cover what they're kind of saying. And there's a couple holes in there I want to make sure you guys are aware of before you kind of get all your panties in a bunch there. Then I want to jump into talking about what would happen if we saw a reopening. In fact, as many of you know, the US is actually reopening. And so is it actually stimulating their real estate marketplace? I think that'll matter for us here as well to kind of take a look at what they're doing, because they seem to be one step ahead of us in opening, that is. And then I want to look at what history can teach us about a second wave. This is not the first pandemic that has swept the nation. And so we have numbers there to prove to us what we should and shouldn't do and to kind of learn from. The question is, will history repeat itself? And this Sunday marks 2 months of Ontario being locked down and entering our sanitary revolution. I love the sound of that. Sounds great. It's also my in-laws' anniversary. Coincidence? I think not. And we're looking forward to some beautiful weather over the next week or so. I've heard it could be up to 30 degrees. And this morning, if you missed it, make sure you check out our interview with my new friend, Casey Wong. We did an interview, and you can go back and check that out. That was put out just this morning on our podcast channels. It was also uploaded to YouTube yesterday. And he is a big wig investor across the GTA and is able to teach us some cool stuff relating to property management and how he's kind of been dealing with all of the challenges going on right now, if at all. Is he even experiencing it? And I love talking with larger investors and getting their take on the whole thing. So let's get into this conversation about condo price drops. As the title to this podcast says, median condo prices in Toronto dropped 10%. Study, says the study, I guess is the way they kind of position that. Now, this article comes from the Toronto Sun, but they are not the only one publishing this info. It seems to be the biggest news as of the day. And yet I found their article was pretty good. So I thought I'd cover this one and kind of talk a little bit about what we're experiencing in our marketplace. This is the article. Toronto condo prices have dropped by $65,000 or 10% during the pandemic, according to a new study from Zoocasa. The data released Wednesday shows the median Toronto condo apartment price declined between February to April to $574,000. Condo sales, meanwhile, dropped 64% since February, with just 482 transactions taking place across the city in April compared to 1,335 in February. So obviously, and we've actually seen articles that say the number of transactions have pretty much fallen off a cliff. Like they actually quote it that way. They say off a cliff. The article goes down and says real estate experts has forecasted in February that Toronto real estate was setting up for a record-breaking spring season, with home sales up 45% year over year and home prices forecasted to go up 10% in 2020. This is what people were saying. I remember it was funny because even very prominent on my YouTube channel, there's a forecast for 2020. It's kind of every year, everyone demands that, right? Like it seems to be the #1 performing video every year is these prediction videos. And our predictions were pretty bright too. So I'm in line with this. And so it's really funny to see it that it's still on there because it's kind of like, uh-oh, I guess I got the prediction wrong on that one. Since the pandemic began in mid-March and continued through to the end of April and physical distancing measures have been put in place, home buyers and sellers opted to play it safe and remain on the sidelines. That's the key here. Home buyers and sellers opted to play it safe and sit on the sidelines. If it was one or the other, we would have been screwed. Zoocasa said home sales slowed considerably, especially in the condo apartment market at 70%. Still, the new market conditions since COVID-19 have created opportunities for buyers who may have previously remained on the sidelines. Okay, let's hear it. Due to the competitive nature of the market subsiding, qualified buyers who may have otherwise foregone an attempt at a home search even 4 to 8 weeks ago are now reviewing how they can participate and starting to enter the market. That came from Emma Pace, a Zoocasa agent in Toronto. Thank you, Emma. And I'm going to add my 2 cents to that as well. I was calling places, as I frequently do, for clients just to kind of send out some feelers, if you will. This is an opportunity for potential lowball offers, but I'm seeing the window once again closing. I contacted an agent yesterday on a condo out in Oakville, and I said, hey, okay, you're listed at, I think the place was $439, and we threw out a number. We're like, hey, you guys open to, I don't know, I can't remember what it was, $410 or whatever. And her response was, no, we're not. We actually have received 3 other offers at asking over the last couple weeks, one of which was accepted and fell through on financing. And my client's like, oh, should we believe her? I mean, maybe she's lying, but regardless, she's not taking our offer, so she has no reason to lie if that's the case. We are seeing more activity picking up on the buyer side, and sellers seem to be getting more and more confident, which is a pain in the butt because I was kind of hoping there'd be more of a room for deals. But these windows close. If they close quickly, it's a symbol, it's an indicator for me anyways, that things are going to rebound quite quickly. But you can write your own story there. So what I wanted to do though is I want to talk, first of all, I want to cover what they're kind of saying in this article, who's like kind of who did really good and who sucked. But if you want more info on a neighborhood level, definitely go check it out. Like I can't go through all 35 neighborhoods here on this podcast because otherwise we would all be going to bed and I'd have to make this a nighttime bedtime podcast episode. But I want to cover kind of the tops, the bottoms, and then I want to cover where I see there's holes in this number because I do think there's a big gaping hole in the middle of this whole survey. Out of 35 City of Toronto neighborhoods, 21 city neighborhoods had fewer than 10 sales during the month of April. That's going to be very important at the end here. 21 out of 35 had fewer than 10 sales during the month of April. At a neighborhood level, median prices dropped more than $100,000 in 2 neighborhoods, including Mount Pleasant East, topping the list. Okay, they had the worst. They were down $131,000 or 18%. And then we have Regent Park, St. Jamestown, and Corktown grouped together, and they dropped $103,000, a roughly 14% drop. Now, this is funny because you'll remember a few days ago I was talking about I have a condo coming on the market. We're actually putting it up today, funny enough, and it's in St. Jamestown. And if you remember what I was saying, is I didn't sense that there was much of a drop, which is silly because here I'm hearing price drops of 103. That home, it's a 2-bedroom and a den property. We're putting it up at $799 today. We were talking a couple months ago about putting it up pre-COVID, and we were going to price it at the same amount. But obviously, we were hoping for multiples and to go well over 8. That was our price expectation, but definitely not 9. Definitely not. If we got 900,000, then I would have to retire real estate. But we were going to price it at $799. Now we're seeing that that's kind of in line with what other things are being listed at right now. And we're still listing it at $799. Granted, we won't necessarily get over 8. We'll see. Who knows, depending on how things pick up here. But that's where we're pricing it still. So to say we've dropped 100,000, I'm just not seeing that. And so it kind of makes me wonder. But anyways, I'll let them have their survey and I'll sit here and shut my mouth. However, only one neighborhood, Milliken Agincourt North, actually made money on condos, and they rose 34,500 or 7%. They were really the only one that grew. And this was kind of a quote. I actually agree with it. Since COVID-19, more expensive homes have been sitting on the market for longer with less offers on the table compared to the market prior to COVID-19. However, properties that fit the criteria and price range for most first-time buyers are still moving relatively quicker than homes at a higher price point, which can explain why EO7 Milliken Agincourt North is experiencing price increases. So this is the key here. This 10%, by the way, let me read this. I don't know if it's in the heading. It's median. Yeah, it does say it. So it actually says it's median condo price. So what's funny is in the last couple of weeks, we're talking about what is the news going to look like? Is the news going to come out and be optimistic or is it going to be negative? To me, this sounds really negative, right? Like April's down 10% condos. But the key here is it's the median, right? Like it's clickbaity. It's telling people things are going really bad. But when we dig deeper, that's the median. If the high-end homes aren't selling, of course you're going to have numbers skewed downwards. And this kind of explains to me, that's the first issue I'm kind of seeing in this whole scenario, but I'm going to cover you the big one in just a second. In E07, that's that region, the sold price range for condos was around 352 to 610, making it a neighborhood with price points friendlier for first-time buyers. Although many investors remain on the sidelines, there's still demand from first-time home buyers. Good job, guys. Go get those properties when everyone says you can't. This is your opportunity to snatch those suckers, especially when you're not tied to having to sell something in the first place. But don't wait too long because I don't want you guys to get caught. Particularly those who want to take advantage of the lower interest rate environment or those who may have been outbid many times when the market was at its peak in February. Also a terrible time. You guys think it's rough now? Try going back to February trying to put an offer in. Also sucked. It's not like it went from hard to hard. It was never an easy point in all of this. So I would say first-time home buyers are taking the lead here. Good job, guys. Okay, so here is what I see. And I'm going to read this as a quote from the article. I think this is a big gaping hole. Let's see if you catch it. Zoocasa obtained median condo apartment prices and sales for April 2020 and February 2020 from Tread. The median price is the price at which half the homes in an area are sold at a higher price and half the homes are sold at a lower price. Hopefully you guys remember that from high school math, right? It's the median. It's not the mean. It's not the average. It's the center number. The percentage change, here it is, in median price is only calculated for areas with 10 or more condo apartment sales, according to the real estate agency. What the heck? Why do that? Why do that? The percentage change in median price is only calculated for areas with 10 or more condo apartment sales, according to the real estate agency. So Zoocasa literally knocked out, if you remember, 21 out of 35 neighborhoods for the sake of getting that number. Oh man, I hope I'm reading that wrong. Somebody please correct me. Are we serious? Anyways, so apparently we're only using, what is that? What's the math on that? 14 out of 35 in order to get that stat. And yet we're publishing it and it's getting thrown around like something I can't say on a podcast trying to maintain this PG rating. Damn it. All right, moving on. So I would say, just to kind of summarize that article, go and check out your region. Still very good information, still very interesting, especially on a per neighborhood basis. But just be cautious when you're using these figures. I do think that they are skewed, at least by my account. All right, let's move on from here. I think that there is a lesson to be learned as we kind of plan on reopening. And you guys are hopefully hearing the news. Today there's supposed to be another insight from the Premier's office talking about the step one of opening up our economy. And so the question is what's happening in the States? Because a lot of states have started opening up. Here is an interesting article from CNBC.com. Mortgage applications from buyers jump 11%, signaling the spring housing market may not be a total loss. I was just thinking about that yesterday. First of all, it's been very cold, right? But the other thing that was kind of got me going is we've got Realtor Quest coming up, which is obviously being completely changed. I don't even know if I'm going to attend. It'll be online probably. But Realtor Quest usually happens in the spring, right? And so it tells me like maybe the spring's not totally gone. And so if the states have opened, that's kind of true, right? Like maybe the spring is possible, at least in the US, and depending on how fast Canada opens, maybe we don't need to wait till the fall. Let's see. As some states reopen from the nationwide coronavirus shutdown and open houses reemerge in the States, of course, not in Canada, or at least not here, not local. I haven't heard anything from Korea. I think they just wanted to shut down across the country. So, but still, again, they're slightly ahead of us here. Buyers are coming back to the housing market much faster than expected. Applications to purchase a home rose for the fourth straight week, jumping a decisive 11%. They were still 10% lower compared to the same week 1 year ago, but the annual loss has been shrinking markedly. Last week, purchase volume was down 19% annually, and 1 month ago, it was down 35%, right? So it was down 35. Now it's down 10% from year over year, but it's also up 11%, which is a big jump in applications. And one thing I want to add here that was came out of an article I read yesterday, just to bring it up again, this idea that you could get caught flat-footed, right? I do think, just in my mind, it makes sense that there will be a moment where you could actually get completely screwed as a buyer. And here's where it'll happen. Everyone's kind of sitting on the sidelines. Sellers are going to wait because they're not going to undersell their home, at least not in this climate, until they're in a position of needing to sell or dump their properties, which will be a matter of time. It will be in coming months. It won't be in the next month or so. It's going to be a while out, at least by my account. But there's going to be this window where buyers are like, well, wait a minute, we're opening things up. I want to go look at properties. And so you're going to get a surge of buyers, but you're going to have to wait until the data comes out where you're going to get the confidence of the sellers to list. And so that would actually boost the growth that much further. And now, how big is that window? I don't know. Is that an actual thing? In my mind, it makes sense, but who knows? Who knows? Who wants to hear what I'm saying anyways? We saw lower unemployment drops in Canada, obviously, compared to the States. Here's some things to note as well. But to me, it doesn't feel like 2008, right? Like 2008 was far longer lasting. It happened in the real estate segment. So clearly real estate was affected by, I can't remember the numbers. I think it was like 30% drops or something crazy. It was nuts. Foreclosures everywhere, deals everywhere. People investing in Canada ran to the States for those deals. It was nuts. But as the U.S. opens, their real estate does seem to be soaring. And so my expectation is ours will too, right? Like once we start opening things up, why can we not have that same thing? And I would say that Canada is even safer. I mean, you got things like interest rates down and all of these things encouraging buyer activity on the tail end of this, but time will tell. Okay, let's start to transition into, I want to talk about an article that came out of CBC, which is kind of a good one. And it's talking, so the article title, by the way, is Deadly Second Wave of Spanish Flu Pandemic of 1918 May Hold Clues for Reopening Today. So kind of along this line of reopening, there's a couple articles, just to read the headlines, out of CTV News. Toronto is preparing to reopen off-leash dog parks. Tory's kind of talking about opening up dog parks. So this at the city level, Doug Ford today is actually going to be announcing opening and easing restrictions of COVID-19 in Ontario, and the question is Ontario ready? That came out of a CBC article as well. So as we're kind of talking about reopening, obviously not as fast as the US, but opening nonetheless, what could this mean? And so I like this article because it kind of points to what happened before. And I've mentioned in our podcast in prior episodes, my biggest concern is this surge of a second wave, because if we were to go back into isolation and close the doors once again, that would be an additional shock to our system. So we've seen price drops. I mean, in the last article, you saw 10% median price drops. I don't think that's truly reflected, but I do think that at our peak, I have seen the average pricing dropping between 8 to 10.5%. So let's take that 10% figure, right? That we've seen that drop already. Things seem to be kind of at a bottom, at least by my account. You've got months of inventory pretty much flat, at least based on the last numbers. They seem to be kind of closing that gap. So unless something else were to kind of be a massive shock, I don't see something happening. So this second wave poses, in my mind, the greatest threat to something suddenly affecting our real estate prices, other than long-term economic downturn, which is kind of a whole other pickle and difficult to summarize here. But let's say, well, I guess we need to know what this would look like, because it did happen before. We can look back there. This is the article. As governments ease up on COVID-19 related lockdowns, policymakers should heed the lessons learned from the 1918 Spanish flu. Man, these early 20s, it's like every 100 years. I feel bad for the next generation. Spanish flu pandemic and the potential deadly consequences of removing physical distancing restrictions too quickly, experts say. Quote, this comes actually from an associate professor at Oregon State Center of Humanities. He said, this is one of those rare moments that historians can actually more or less agree that there are lessons you can be learned that are fairly straightforward and could be applied in the present. Thanks, Tips. More than 100 years ago, the Spanish flu was responsible for the deaths of at least 50 million people worldwide, 55 in Canada and 675 in the US, including many people between the ages of 20 and 40. So that's obviously a bit of a difference. It was a different pandemic, but it was still a pandemic. The virus also came in multiple waves. The second wave in the fall of 1918 considered the deadliest. Okay, so some of the measures that they had at the time, in case you hadn't heard, you might have seen articles about this in the past, but they shut down public gatherings, they closed schools and theaters, they prohibited religious services. In some communities, they were making it mandatory for masks. So in this article, it says, Barry said he is particularly concerned that cities and states are reopening while cases in their jurisdiction continues to rise. Reminds me of like this kind of balance between Ontario and Quebec, right? Like we are being clearly more cautious in Ontario. In the States, there is some mass differences, and a lot of it is being turned very political. But some places are opening, even though cases are going down, and media is making a big stink about it. But at the end of the day, it's up to their states, right? Like it's up to the governors of each state to make that decision. Quote, that did not happen in the single U.S. city that I know of in 1918, he said. They would wait until the curve dramatically turned down before they would take any action to reopen. So they were considerably more conservative. So they were even more conservative, is what they're saying here, than today. Because today, there are, on the right side, some very extreme people that are only concerned about the economy. There's no balance here. Like, it's either on one side or the other fence. The division is just crazy. Fortunately, in Canada, we have more of a community feel here, where we're working on this together. Communities that impose restrictions early, enforce them and remove them as late as possible, or reimpose them as necessary had lower mortality rates. One city that did follow a good path was Seattle, which imposed increasingly strict restrictions and kept them in place for 5 weeks. Imagine that, 5 weeks. And what did I say we were on? Coming on 2 months. Officials closed schools, prohibited churches services, weakened work hours, and mandated the wearing of masks in public. This is the other thing, too. They obviously had sharp deaths. Our death rate seems to be lower, which seems to linger. So it's different, right? Like nothing happens the same, but yet it does. When the second wave hit, the city immediately went into quarantine system and didn't end up having to reimpose tough physical distance measures. So they didn't actually go back on what they originally did. And the public in general was really compliant. They did really well. They had half the per capita death rate than those of the hardest hit cities. Another point that they add here that I think is worth mentioning, still as cities reopened, many people remained anxious about getting sick and returned to work. He said some cities reported a 40 to 70% decrease in all commercial activity across the board, even after they reopened. Have we not hinted at this, right? Like, you're going to reopen, but that doesn't mean you're going to be setting up some mini parties at Chuck E. Cheese like you were before. Who has parties at Chuck E. Cheese? Actually, those were the best days. Definitely got to take Emily to Chuck E. Cheese for her 3rd birthday. That would be for me, though. Those little bowling machines, so much fun. Getting stuck in those big play places. Are there age restrictions? Probably. I think what one big lesson of that time is, even if everything could come roaring back, even if you could flip the lights on to the whole economy, individuals are going to make choices related to their exposure, which differ significantly from the kind of ways in which this is talking. Oh man, I just butchered that. Forget it. You get the idea. I butchered that quote. I'm not going to try it again. In the meantime, money is going out the door. So I want to share with you, before we wrap up here, what's going on, right? Because we are in this balance right now between the economy and between health and keeping everyone safe. And so in the meantime, it's not like this is coming at no cost. The market is seems to be doing okay, considering even Warren Buffett didn't invest. We're doing okay. But at the same time, it's coming at a heavy price tag through the means of government spending. And here's a couple big things, articles just recent to share with you. $2.5 billion COVID-19 aid package for seniors gives too much to people who don't need it, experts say. So there's articles about like we're over giving, right? Like, and people are looking at it and like everyone says, oh, that's a good thing to do. You know, like there's what are you going to say? Like, no, don't give grandma a paycheck. But realistically, we are spending a ton of money. Trudeau scoffs at, this is another article from Toronto Sun, Trudeau scoffs at questions about hundreds of millions in fraudulent payments. This is talking about the emergency benefit, right? Like just letting them go out the door. It's going to cost it's going to have a big price tag, guys. So we can't be in here forever. There is this fine balance. Now, as far as it relates to real estate, obviously the sooner we reopen, the better, but we also have to be more cautious we don't hit the second wave, because I think the second wave leading to closures more than the wave itself. I think the closures is going to trigger a problem for Toronto real estate. But in the meantime, there's great buying opportunities out there. The window for buyer deals seems to be closing, at least on my end. The stats are yet to come out, and as soon as they do, you're going to hear them here on Toronto's #1 real estate podcast. Thanks, guys, for listening. Leave us a comment. Any comment is good. Any feedback. Doesn't have to be a good comment either. Just don't spam us. I've had to kick some people for spamming, and hopefully the spammers are out. But in the meantime, I'd love to have dialogue with you guys, and we're going to continue to grow and share content. And it's just been a wonderful journey. Thanks for connecting with us every day. And we've been doing 6 days a week. If you don't know, welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. Go back and check some of our old podcasts out. There's some really good stuff. And I will see you guys next time with more. Take care and keep it real.